Welcome back to another episode of Complex Like Wine, the podcast where we talk about complicated things and improve over time just like wine does. Thank you, Dan, for being a guest on the podcast with your little furry friend. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm doing very good. Thank you. So before we get into this week's topic and before I let Dan introduce himself and all that, of course, we have our beverages with us. I am drinking a Pinot Noir.
This is really hard to open. Okay.
Dan has got a beer.
A Flemish sour red, but the one they normally carry at the liquor store was discontinued. And I asked about it, and I was like, "Do you have maybe Rodenbach?" I was like, "You know, I think we might." Pull it out of the back. That bottle says 2015 on it, so we'll see.
We'll see. How does it smell?
Okay, that is not great. It lost all its.
Uh-oh.
It felt so on point with the podcast of things that get better with time.
Right.
Unfortunately, this one did not. I'll swap it out in a minute, but we'll go on.
Yeah, sometimes you get surprised and you're like, ooh, that did not age like I thought it would. And you're like, But drink's a drink. Like, I'll still drink it.
Mhm.
So, I actually also have a cat that just looks like yours. He's also tuxedo, but he has a little bit less white on the chest and has the white chin.
Oh, cute.
Yeah. But yeah, Dan, introduce yourself. So I know you make music, you do ADHD coaching, and so yeah, I would just love to hear more about you, about both of those experiences, and kind of how you got into them.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm Dan Crowdus. I'm an ADHD coach. I've been doing that for about 2 years now. So yeah, I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 7 years old, and had to really develop a lot of systems for that. Now I'm lucky that I was able to get a lot of support early on in my life. And it was during the pandemic, seeing everybody really struggling. A lot of new ADHD diagnoses were happening, and there was a lot of people working at home for the first time. Whereas I've been working at home since my mid 20s, and that took a lot of difficulty when I was just feeling like, wait, all of a sudden I have to create all my own structure. So I built all these systems, read a lot of books, worked with various therapists, coaches, and I was able to be really successful with my ADHD. So yeah, during the pandemic, seeing all these people struggling for the first time, that really inspired me to go out and be a coach. I was like, I have all this knowledge, I can help these people. So it's been really rewarding for that. And yeah, I'm also a music producer. I create electronic music. I've been doing that also since my mid 20s. Also a computer engineer. So I used to be a jazz musician, but I was never really that good at it. And I'm wondering if ADHD might be one of the reasons because I couldn't really get into that flow or the solo. I'd always get distracted by something in the crowd. So all of a sudden, when I realized, oh, I can make music with computers, that really, really worked for my brain.
That's so interesting. Are there any specific artists that are like inspiration or for your type of music style or just any other electronic artists that are your go-tos?
Oh, Daft Punk was really
Yeah.
started it all for me. And there's tons of others that are like ones thing here and there, but it's really Daft Punk that kind of just put that love in my soul.
hmm I saw Daft Punk once. This was a few years ago, and that was amazing.
So envious.
I'm a big electronic music person, so not as much now, but I used to go to so many festivals, raves, concerts, and all that. So I remember seeing Daft Punk once, and that was a pretty cool experience.
All right. Well, you just got some major points in my book.
Yes. Well, yeah, we had talked about different topics to go, but we both decided we would just kind of let it free flow and see what happens. Because I think when we first had our first meeting, we just got along really well and just had so many great ideas. One of the main things I kind of want to go into first is the idea of like therapy versus coaching, because I'm still relatively new to that understanding. And for people listening, when I decided I wanted to do career change, I initially thought I wanted to go into like family marriage therapy and do that, but I realized for me personally, I wouldn't be able to do that long term. I think I would get empathy fatigue really quickly, and so I decided to do the switch more with coaching. And so would love to kind of hear from your experience. Like, I guess we can start off with your mental health first, and then from there, what you have to share in regards to therapy versus coaching.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly had my own mental health journey, and it was my early 30s, and I was so focused on music before that. And a lot of us get into this toxic mindset if we don't, quote unquote, succeed by a certain age, that we've failed. And I had really gotten that into myself where, yeah, at the end of my 20s, I was like, oh, I wasn't a rock star yet, therefore, oh, it's just over. And that's why I just got depressed for some years and wasn't really able to do that. And that's really another reason that I got into coaching, is to help people and hopefully prevent them from going down that path. And I've had some clients now that I see that, in their late 20s, and I'm like, oh man, would you have gone down the path that I did? But yeah, coaching versus therapy. Sometimes I like to think of it, if you break your leg and then, you get it set, when you're trying to get back up to a normal level, you'll go to a physical therapist, and they'll help you learn to walk again, do some basic exercises, and then you can be functional in the world. Whereas with coaching, that would be more like a personal trainer. It's like, okay, you're back to a baseline, but what if you want to be back to an athlete level again? Say an Olympic athlete breaks their leg, they're going to go to somebody that can really coach them how to be the best that they can be. So that also implies, though, that with coaching, as a person, if you really want to get the most out of it, you're best off going to therapy first. Even if you don't think you have some trauma that you need to work through, there's probably something that we all have that's going to just make it easier for a coach to work with you. Also, with a therapist, they take years and years of training to be able to potentially work with anybody. Whereas most coaches, they really find some specific niche that they're best at. So if you're a person that's considering coaching, trying to figure out what exactly are you trying to get out of that, and then search and find the coach that really specializes in that one thing that you really want to improve.
Mm-hmm.
How would you describe that?
Well, first I was to say that's a really good analogy. I've been lately a lot been trying to explain the idea of what I want to do with coaching, and I've always explained it is, you go to therapy, let's say you're below baseline. You go to therapy to get back to, like you said, functional, quote unquote, like normal. But then with coaching, specifically, I want to go the positive psychology route, and I think I've nailed on to wanting to be more of a resiliency coach. You're for that I would see, people or clients that are at baseline. They've done therapy and they want to work on tools to expand upon that. So you're working from baseline to above. So I think your analogy with a physical therapist and a personal trainer is explained really well, because it gives people a more relatable idea to grasp on that. But I 100% agree with you. I think that's a really good way to put it.
So, how would you define a resiliency coach? It's a really cool idea.
Thank you. I how I defined it, man. I think how I personally would want to go about it, and there's still so much research I need to go into it, but finding either guides, tools, working with a client of what are some ways that we can, whether it's reframing your mindset on a particular issue or obstacles are inevitable to come in life, what are ways we can better approach these things, that way when shit hits the fan, you're able to bounce back better or quicker, just more appropriately than maybe someone that is unsure and they might get stuck or ruminate. And I really like the idea about resiliency, because with my upbringing, I went through a lot from an early young age, and I'm in a weird way very fortunate of my crappy upbringing, because it forced me to become resilient and learn how to bounce back. And so that's why I got into wanting to do this podcast, because I want to be able to share ways or just topics, ideas from not just myself, but from other people, to people that could benefit from guides, tools, just different tips in regards to ways they can approach life or within themselves.
Yeah, I really love the concept of proactive mental health. And that really seems to be
Yes.
like what you're looking at, is that, hey, with physical health, you don't wait until your body is completely falling apart to take care of it, to exercise, eat right, go to the doctor. But a lot of people have that mindset with mental health that, oh, I can't seek any kind of mental health support unless I am really, really depressed or something. Like, why would you wait for that? Why would you want to ever get to that point in the first place? So I'm really glad to hear that you're embracing that mindset. Um, Something else that you just said reminded me, one of my mentors told me that your story is your gold. Basically, as a coach, if you're trying to decide, anybody listening to this, if you're thinking of becoming a coach yourself, what is it about your story that you can use to make you stand out, to make you unique? And for you, it was your upbringing that was sounds like it was pretty unfortunate. And for me, it was building these ADHD skills I needed to survive working from home. But then we can take that and we can help the world because what we went through, we can help other people not have to go through that.
And I think it takes a lot of time and self work and self love to get to a place where you can view your trauma, mistakes, any negative parts of your story, your quote unquote life, and use it as fuel to benefit others. It took me a long time to get to a place instead of, being like, why me, poor me. And, I don't want to throw shade to anybody that's in that space because we all have been there. But I finally was able to reframe and say, well, now I have this room and empathy and understanding for when there's peers of mine that are going through something similar that I had went through. I know how I can be better equipped to be there for them. And so I just really love that and the whole proactive because again, same with like even physical health or especially with mental health, people wait until it's too late and then they're having to pick up the mess or get the medication, the surgeries, whatever it may be, to kind of get themselves back to baseline. Versus if you eat healthy, you take care of your mental health, you prioritize yourself and make sure you're healthy overall, you won't get to that place where you're in panic mode and it's like, all right, we need to start picking up the pieces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, why is this happening for me instead of why is this happening to me? But, if you're not at that level yet, don't feel bad because by default, that's how our brains are made. We want to focus on the negative because as prehistoric humans, that probably helped us survive.
Mm-hmm.
Living in that society anymore. I mean, we have this world where we are physically safe. If we're lucky enough to live in, this country, obviously that's not true for everyone these days. But still, like our brains, they want to find danger to avoid. They want to find the thing to catastrophize. And if your life is safe, then you have to find ways to program your brain so it's not always trying to find the negatives. And that takes work. You have to put the reps in to get there.
It's like muscle memory. If you've been so used to going to the negatives, it's going to take a lot of practice and effort to make that mind switch. And this is something my therapist told me because I used to struggle with severe anxiety. And she would say, like, it's natural. We, from prehistoric times or from the beginning of time, anxiety has been used to help us survive. But like you said, we're in a time now where we don't need those survival skills really now. So it's learning how can we use that energy for something more productive.
Hmm. Exactly. So, yeah, what are some techniques that you use or teach for that kind of thing?
Man, so well, being physically active, going to the gym has been probably the catalyst for my anxiety issues. I think this is the first year in 10 years where I don't have anxiety or haven't had any issues. Thank you. And going to the gym was a really big part of that. Just being active has helped me so much. Journaling, being outside, being in the sun. That's why I went to the mountains this past weekend because, there's just been a lot on my mind. I need to be outside and get some fresh air and just relax, prioritizing myself because I had tendencies where I can be a people pleaser. And so now getting to a place where if I don't have the social battery for something or, someone's not respecting a boundary of mine, just being a little bit more firm and being okay with having to say no has also been a huge learning lesson for me.
Yes, absolutely. The thing about exercise, also, if you have ADHD, is that it's going to generate a lot of the chemicals that are contained or that are generated when you take stimulant ADHD medication. So if you don't want to take medication or even if it's not enough for you, It's just you need to be doing some kind of exercise, especially resistance training or anything where you get your heart rate up for 20 to 30 minutes at least, a few times a week. It doesn't have to be athlete level, but if you're not doing that at all, it's not only are you missing out on those chemicals, but what you need to create neuroplasticity or the brain's ability to change in the ways that the two of us are talking about, you're not going to be able to do that on your own. Like you need to be out there to just keep the machine working of your brain.
Hmm. For me, it's definitely a form of mindfulness. You know, I'm able to go to the gym, lift my weights, do my cardio afterwards, and I don't have to think about anything else. I'm just thinking about me at the gym, my reps, you know, can I push this weight? Can I not? And it just kind of helps me mentally check out from any thoughts or any stress that's going on. And so that's really interesting you bringing up the whole ADHD that it can help replicate that. What have been some things for yourself that you practice daily or more frequently that have been good for you in regards to whether ADHD or just overall mental health?
Definitely journaling. But lately I've been doing very specific journaling where I'll start with some negatives in my head, and this really helps with anxiety as well. Really facing the kind of things that are going to be spinning around in your head all day, whether you acknowledge them or not. So getting those out at first, being as negative, as catastrophizing as you want to be, and then once it's on paper or a typed page, it doesn't have as much power over you anymore. And then you can look at it and maybe have some counter arguments, or maybe just acknowledge it. Yeah, I need to deal with this. So you've purged that. Then I'll replace it with some gratitudes, but getting those down, and then some brags. Like, what did I do well the previous day? Or
Mm.
the previous day wasn't that productive. What am I just proud of myself for in my life? So I'm grateful for, I'm proud of myself. And I'll do other journaling too, maybe some long form, but having that really quick pattern almost every morning, it just sets your brain up for the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also what you're saying about meditation and like being at the gym, that can be meditative. And a lot of people with ADHD, they really struggle with traditional meditation. So, but you don't just have to sit there by yourself. There's other ways to achieve that meditative state. Something even as simple as taking a walk. And I think that's what you were talking about when you're, lifting your weights and doing your cardio. There's so much time that our brains right now, either we have a screen in front of us, maybe you're reading a page, we're in a conversation, and all those times your subconscious doesn't really get a break to just work on your problems, the things in your head, the things that you want to think about. And so when you take a walk, your conscious brain is occupied enough. There's things to look at, you're putting one foot in front of the other, but then the rest of your brain, it can really start to work in the ways that meditation also does. So if you can't or don't want to sit down and just be in silence for 20 minutes straight, there are other options.
Mm-hmm. I think at the beginning when I was learning about meditation and mindfulness, I really thought it was just, you know, like typical yogi, you do yoga, you sit in silence, no thoughts are allowed. And I had a hard time with that approach. But then as I worked more with my therapist and just kind of reflecting and reading more on what mindfulness is, it's like there's a lot of different ways you can go about it, and it can work for every single type of person. Like you just need to find your little niche, something that works for you, and just be consistent with it on some way, and it can make a huge difference.
Yeah, and there's other ways too, like mantras. Um, just talking with somebody that was recommending transcendental meditation, which I think is the similar kind of thing where you can kind of work with somebody and get like a specific mantra for you. I haven't looked into that yet, but I've experimented a lot with that. I still do traditional meditation, but I only usually do it for about 5 to 10 minute blocks in the middle of other things. And then for longer ones, I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to go for a really long walk. Or even maybe you could be driving and just turn the music off if that's
Mm.
the only time that you have in your day. And just as long as you have some kind of silence, it doesn't mean to have actually audio silence, but you're not actually looking or processing something actively. Because there's the whole idea that we all have these shower thoughts, right? You have these epiphanies in the shower. And why is that? Is because there's nothing for your brain to actively do. And then it starts working on these problems.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, have you ever done like a sound bath before?
I have. My partner's really into those. I haven't had the opportunity to make it really transcendental for me, but that might be more of the sound baths. I've heard that they weren't necessarily as sonically enveloping, for lack of a better
Mm.
word.
Hmm.
Yeah. Have you?
Yeah, I actually did one this past weekend, and I've done a handful of them, and I would say this one, I have to describe it almost like a shroom trip because the things, I'm a very visual person, especially with like music. I can see a lot of things, and just the sensations I was having, the visuals I was having in my brain. I left the sound bath feeling like, ooh, like whoa, like definitely almost an out of body experience. But I think it really depends, like who's doing the sound bath, how it's set up, where you're at mentally first. Is there anything else that's kind of blocking you mentally, or are you just kind of there to receive?
Hmm. I have had that experience with breath work.
Mm.
Have you tried that? I don't know what it's called, maybe Wim Hof, where you breathe really rapidly, like the one, two, three, and you basically over oxygenate yourself to the point your hands start to cramp up because there's so much oxygen that you're taking in your blood. And that's the definitely the closest I've ever felt as far as feeling like I'm on drugs without being on drugs. Outside of that, though, it can sometimes bring up some stuff that you're not quite ready to deal with yet. I mean, it's just all the truths. But, we all need those moments in our lives. Otherwise, we can just be going on ignoring things that are in the back of our brains. And we need to figure out what's there. Otherwise, it's going to hold us back. And if you're procrastinating on something, a lot of times there's a reason for that. We're avoiding some kind of pain. And if you're not willing to examine all the negativity that's hidden in your brain, then you might never get past that source of procrastination.
Hmm. Is there any specific examples within your own experience of maybe like epiphanies or aha moments where you realize I have not been acknowledging this, and now it's been to the forefront of your consciousness where you're like, okay, we need to address this and learn a way to work with it.
Yeah. So, I was talking about those rough years in my early 30s dealing with depression. Even after I got back and I was doing better in my life and starting to rebuild and put the pieces back together, I still had writer's block with music. And I wanted nothing more in the world than to make music again. But I would sit down and I would try to start again and feel actual pain. And I was like, I don't understand what's going on. I'm ready. I've moved to LA. I built this great setup. I've got it all here. I've got the time. Make music. It was like hitting an invisible wall. So yeah, working with therapists and coaches and finally getting to the bottom is that I hadn't forgiven myself for what I thought was my failures in my late 20s of the things that I had so many opportunities. I was doing so well and I just let it all go. Therefore, I'm not a real musician. I'm a fraud. I'm a failure. All these things that I didn't know how firmly they were written in my mind from those years of being depressed and just thinking these things that we really do program ourselves. And it's not as simple to say, like, okay, I'm feeling better. I'm going to do this. It takes a lot more work to rewrite our emotions and our subconscious. And that's why, even once I had that epiphany, I wasn't able to get back right away. And there was no one thing that got me back to being able to make music again. So if you're listening and you're in that spot and you're stuck creatively or with something else that you really want to do and there's something in the way, keep working at it. There's probably not going to be any one magic epiphany, but a lot of little epiphanies, maybe 100 of them. And it's that path and you slowly get there. But once you do, it's so worth it.
Hmm. I love that. I think for me, a big thing I've had to really work through is vulnerability and what I guess love is in terms of self love and all that. Growing up, I'm not in contact with my mom, so we have an estranged relationship there. But through her, one common theme I was taught of, like, love is conditional. Like, you have to work for it to receive it. And so I realize now through past few failed relationships how that transcended into those of being afraid of vulnerability, not opening up, and being hyper dependent and creating a distance between me, friends, partners, whoever, and having to really work that through therapy of why am I like this? And then realizing like, oh, it's because there's still unaddressed issues I have as a little kid. And so I think one of the big things for me was really doing like inner child work and what is the little version of me, what did she need at the time? And so learning how to give that to myself, like how to mother myself in that way. And it's allowed me to be a lot more open, I would say. And I think part of it too is just not caring what other people think or opinions and just be more authentically myself and just learning how to, I guess, go with the punches of life. And if things don't work out, it is what it is. But you were able to get a learning lesson out of it instead of viewing it as, time wasted or complete like a whole negative experience.
So if somebody's struggling to keep those kind of boundaries in their lives like this, since you've had a lot of experience with this, what advice would you give them?
It's a good question. I think, well, I'll explain what I did. I journaling, kind of like you said, I was started writing a list of things that make me uncomfortable or things that make me unhappy or things that upset me in general. And on the other side of it, writing like what are ways that either I could make that better or somebody else could make that better. Like what are behaviors that would be contrasting to that. So I think writing down a list of just things that bother you, upset you, make you feel unsafe, whatever it may be, just seeing that visually gives the person a better idea. Like you put it on paper. And so not to get to a place where if someone's trying to persuade you otherwise, or you throw your boundary list away because like, oh, well, it's okay. This person might be different, or you put yourself last. I think just writing it down helps. And then, but to be blunt, just learning how to stop giving a fuck of what people think. I think just trying to be really honest with yourself of like, okay, if I budge this one time, is it likely to budge beyond that? Am I going to get to a place where I feel unsafe, upset, compromised, or, fill in the blank? And just a lot of having to have a lot of honest conversations with yourself. Like, I agree with you, Sally. It's going to take a lot of time. There's not going to be that one aha thing. And I think with setting boundaries, it is really hard to set boundaries when you've never been taught to set boundaries or you grew up in a household where your boundaries were never respected. So having to respect your own boundaries first takes a lot of work and practice. And I think the best thing you can do is just little by little being a little bit more bolder, being a little more confident with yourself. And if people don't respect it, it's more a reflection of them and not a reflection of you. And it takes a lot of work. I'm still learning. We're still doing it. But I think once you're able to get to that place, it helps weed out people that are not good for you. And you're able to have little like brag moments with yourself where you're like, hey, like I set a boundary, I vocalized something. Like, cool, that's a win. And then journal that, write that down. Like, I have a mirror. I write stuff on my mirror sometimes. So there's wins, quotes, like, I'll just put it on there that way every day I can look at it and it's a reminder.
Yeah. One thing that I think you're kind of hinting at here is that sometimes people think that relationships are really black and white, where either there's red flags, they're really toxic for me, or it's unconditional love. And I don't really believe in the idea of unconditional love either, because if you love somebody and then they decide to start treating you like shit, then why would you continue to love them?
Mm-hmm.
You might still love them in your heart, but you have to love yourself more. And that doesn't mean that you're being narcissistic or selfish. It's just putting yourself first. And that's how you can ultimately be better for the people around you, for the world, really. Um, so yeah, like acknowledging the negative in your relationship with somebody you love, like you said, writing it down, having uncomfortable conversations. That doesn't mean you need to bring up every single little negative thing that bothers you. But I like to say, don't sweat the small stuff, but don't ignore the big stuff, because
Mm-hmm.
if you do, that kind of thing can really slowly eat away at what could be salvaged into a wonderful relationship. Just because you have a major conflict doesn't mean you're toxic. And even if it's an irreconcilable difference between the two of you, that doesn't mean it's toxic either. You just have to figure out how to respect yourself, how to respect the other person. And sometimes respecting the other person means not putting up with their bullshit, because how are they ever going to learn and become better themselves if you always take what they're putting out?
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree with that. I think one thing, well, this is actually something my therapist told me, and it's really stuck with me, whether it's friendships, dating, work. I've realized if the person is not adding to my life, then they should not be there. If they are subtracting from it, making it harder, or taking away from me, cheers, then yeah, they should not be there. And that's been something I've had to really sink in and say, like, okay, what can I provide for myself? So I had to do like an inventory of what are things I do for myself. I grew up with a single dad, so he raised me to be a bit more independent. So in regards to, let's say, romantic relationships, I am a bit more independent and I can take care of myself in a lot of ways. So whether it's romantic friendships, again with work, writing a list like, okay, what are things I already do for myself? What are things I can provide for myself? And if there's someone that is either taking away from it, whether, they're, what's the word? They drain you in some certain type of way, they don't respect a boundary, or they disrespect something in regards to who you are as a character, just kind of being honest and reflecting, how is this benefiting me? And not to say this is in a narcissistic way, but when it is yourself, you're allowed to be a little bit more, prioritize yourself in that way. Like, if they're not healthy for me, then I don't need to put up with it, or I don't need to entertain this.
Mm-hmm. You've been talking a lot about lists and journaling, and I have as well. If you're listening and you're rolling your eyes, be like, oh my God, everyone says lists, everyone says journaling. There's a reason behind this. And it's not just that we like to do it because we're coaches. One of the things you're doing when you write something down or you make a list like this, that's just a, mental inventory, you're moving stuff from your subconscious brain to your conscious brain. Because say, you're working on some problem for your job, and like I was talking about earlier about procrastination being avoiding some sort of pain, those things that you're talking about are still going to be running around in the back of your brain. That's really what anxiety is a lot of the time. It's just these negative thoughts circling around. So getting them out, getting them in front of you in the list, that is putting them out so your logical brain can work on it. And then once it's in front of you, your ability to process that information is 5 times stronger than it was before if you were just ruminating on it.
Mm-hmm. Something I've done, it's not quite a list. So for my people listening out there, if you're like, well, I don't have time to write a list, or you're on the run, you don't have a pen and paper, voice record or video record yourself talking. That was a big thing I did earlier this year when I was going through a really hard transition. I would video record myself, and whether I was crying, venting, or just processing what I was feeling at the time, you can look back on it and listen to yourself, and that kind of helps you have a third party listen of how was I feeling at the time. And then you might reflect on things, you're like, oh, you might know a little bit more about yourself, like, okay, you're feeling this way because of this, so how can we now go forward and think of something differently?
That's a really cool idea. I never thought of that.
Thank
I'm a
you.
much more of a written word person myself. Like I just don't process, spoken word very well. I need to be able to focus, which is why I'm really glad I can see you here. That's much better for my brain. But I do have tons of spiral journals. I'm generally not a hoarder, pack rat at all. But when it comes to these kind of things, I have journals going back years. And sometimes you just want to go back and look through. I'm like, wow, I really am doing a lot better than I was. And it's really, really affirming to see that. I'm like, wow, you get really down on yourself sometimes. Like, I can't believe it's been a whole year and I still haven't finished this project yet. But then you look back to where you were 5, 10 years ago, and you're like, I'm doing all right.
Mm-hmm. I kind of want to tie this into, you have clients where, and you said for yourself, by a certain age, you feel like you need to have accomplished and done all these certain things. And if you don't, it can be really hard. Yeah, I'm 26, so I'm getting to that point where I feel like I should have be doing a lot more than what I am. And I know there's circumstances. I graduated right when the pandemic hit, so that took a halt on a lot of different things. And doing a career shift, I might not be as ahead as some peers that are going straight into the career that they got their degree in. But what is some advice you can give for, people like me or this age range, let's say 25 to 35, where we feel like we're behind and we're struggling? And what is some ways that maybe we could just switch a perspective or just kind of approach it differently?
There's a line in the book The Artist's Way, which I really love.
Okay, I've heard of it. I haven't bought it yet.
Oh yeah, it's really, I mean, it's a commitment. It's 12 weeks. You don't have to do it. But um what was the line again? I forgot. All right. So somebody is 60 years old and he's like, I really want to learn the piano, but why would I bother? I'm already so old. Like, all right, well, imagine yourself 5 years from now. Like, okay. It's like, if you're going to be 65 in 5 years anyway, and you could be a 65-year-old person that knows how to play the piano, or you could be a 65-year-old person that doesn't know how to play the piano. And I think that kind of mindset is that what's behind you is already behind you. That's set. Everything going forward is this huge tree of branches of every decision that you could make that could change everything else. So just looking forward. And look, I'm 41 years old. I'm just now really getting my music career started. And I've been trying on and off really since I was in my early 20s. I still haven't given up. I've had a million failures, and it's just now starting to click. And one of the things is I'm starting to reach out and just get more help, get more advice, seeking out mentors. I really wish I did this 10 years ago. And an earlier version of myself might be filled with regret that I didn't do all these things in my 20s. But now I don't care. So there's no one answer for that either. You have to do the work, all the things we've been talking about that seem unrelated to this, like gratitudes and, all that self-examination. But eventually you do get to the point where you defeat regret. And it's really magical. In ADHD coaching, I launched that in my late 30s. And all these things don't matter. Like it's age is just a number and your life is your own. You don't have to compare yourself to anyone else. Just do what you want to do, live the life that you want to live, and make yourself into the best person that you can be.
Yeah, I think a big issue now is social media is just so in your face all the time. So you're seeing all the cool things people want to share on social media, and it might give you the quote unquote FOMO, or that like, oh, I should be doing this, I should have the money for this, I should be able to be buying a house, I should be married and having kids, this and that, whatever. But really having to just be like, I am my own person, I'm on my own journey, no one else is having the exact same experience as me. And granted, guaranteed, there's probably someone looking at your page that is thinking, oh, I wish I was at where they are at. And so just remembering it's all relative. But as long as you're showing up and trying to do your best, that is the best that you can do.
Another thing that'll help is really just separating yourself from the goal. At this point, yeah, I'm working as hard as I can to be the most successful music producer I can in my own very specific niche way. But it's not about the goal anymore. It very much used to be. And this is one of the reasons that I got in such a bad mindset. For now, like I enjoy the hours I spend working really hard on music, building the live show, all the learning that I'm doing, all the networks that I'm building, working with other collaborators. To me, that's a good life. And that's how I want to spend my weeks. I was like, oh, those hours that I spent working really hard on that's the life that I've designed for myself, and I'm happy with that. And then whatever results happen, they just happen. But don't put yourself in the position where, oh, once I work really hard and then I hit this goal, then I'm going to be happy. You're not going to be happy because you haven't practiced it. Being happy is a skill that you develop over time. So start now and just build the life that you want and make sure that life is enjoying work. I mean, you have to figure out somewhere where you enjoy the work that you do, at least some of it, a little bit. There's always going to be some stuff that you don't want to do, but you choose the problems that you have, and so choose the good ones where even if the work is boring, you say that this is getting me somewhere. But just because it's getting you somewhere, it doesn't mean that the goal provides the happiness. It's the fulfillment of knowing that at the end of every week, I'm like, I did good. Not my
Mm-hmm.
best, but I did good.
I love that. Yeah. It's I again, like I'm in such a huge transition period right now where I've had the thoughts ruminating and kind of reflecting of like, okay, what am I doing? I feel like I might be entering my third quarter life crisis of what the hell's going on. But I think what you said was very beautiful. So thank you. That's gonna sit with me.
Yeah, I mean, there is the whole idea too of, somebody else could be looking at your page and seeing where you are and being envious of you. That's true, but that still gets you in this mindset of that it's everything is a comparison. You're just looking at it in reverse. This is really one of the number one things that gratitude can do. And this isn't just, doing the daily gratitude journaling. It's not about, I'm like, I have to find the most important things every day. It's just, I'm working that muscle every day. It's like going to the gym and you're working a specific muscle every day. You're not going to go in and pick up the heaviest weight. You start small and you build up. And then once you've done that for a long time, it gets a lot easier to look at everyone else and not be envious and not be like, oh, I want what they have. It just I'm grateful that they have accomplished what they have because I can learn from them. One thing that I'd really like to embrace is that envy is a map. If you see somebody, say on social media, and you really, really feel that, like, oh, I wish that was that. How could they have done that so young? I mean, look at me, right? And then instead, you can think, wait a minute, if my brain's reacting like that, what can I learn from this? And
Mm.
what's saying is that, oh, I want that. Okay, what can I learn from this person that's paved this path for me? And, maybe they have advantages you don't have, but there's probably some one little thing that you can take from what they're doing, implement it in your own life, and then make yourself a little bit more like that and get to where you want to go faster.
That's a really good point. And, I think that's some of the good that you can get from social media is a lot more information's accessible. So you can learn some really good things from what people now like to share or what they, whether it's vlogs or like video journals that they share their experience and all that. You're able to learn from them of this is what they did. Okay, well, now I can get some little snippets and tips of, okay, if this is what I want or something similar, how can now I can apply those habits for myself and in my realm. So that's a really good point.
Yeah. I mean, you still have to be careful though, because social media and a lot of other sites, they do play havoc on the brain chemistry and dopamine. Thankfully, the entire world is becoming very aware of this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a little bit can be okay to connect with people, to learn from others, to maybe become a little envious and then see how you can implement that in your own life. But if you're spending too many hours per week in there, it's going to have much more of a negative effect. So you've got to be careful with that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like anything in moderation. Like be smart with it. Yeah. Are there other topics you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, maybe to wrap this up, I was wondering, do you have any book recommendations that you'd like to put out there?
Oh, yeah. So I've mentioned this a lot on the podcast, but I will continue to mention it because these two books honestly changed my life. So Self Compassion by Dr. Kristen Neff, that really helped me. That was the first book recommended to me when I started therapy. And I have always been a person where I'm really hard on myself because I put so much pressure that I need to be doing so much more. I need to be perfect daughter, perfect this and that, whatever, X, Y, and Z. And self compassion really allowed me to rethink how I was talking to myself. Like the whole relationships to self, that really helped me so much. So that is the first book I would recommend to anybody that might be struggling on a self love journey or starting therapy and just needing to find a better way of how they talk to themselves. How to Do the Work by Dr. Nicole LaPara. That was also a really good one. Yeah, I
I
love
haven't read it
that.
yet. My partner has it though.
Oh, okay, no, I love that book. She's coming out with another one of um, how to how to love. It's I don't know. It's a purple cover, but it's more about the relationship with self in regards to loving yourself and how that can transcend into other types of relationships you might have. So that one's coming. I'm excited to read that one. Um, oh man. Another book I appreciated was Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty.
Hmm. Oh yeah, I follow him on Instagram.
Yeah, so he has two books that he's written. I've read both, but How to Think Like a Monk I thought was a really insightful book. Just ways to approach life in so many different aspects and things that he learned as a monk, and focuses a lot more on mindfulness and all that. And so I think that was really good just to have in mind whenever, life events come up. Um, Man, I've have so many books now that I've been reading. I'm trying to think. But what are some of yours? Because I love book recommendations. So please, if you have any.
Yeah, I think the one that's coming to mind as the most relevant to today's conversation is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck,
Okay.
I believe.
I have that in my Amazon cart.
Oh yeah, that's so relevant to everything that we've been talking about, especially the things that you've been talking about. When it comes down to it, that's really a lot of Stoic philosophy and Buddhist philosophy wrapped up in modern language. There's nothing wrong with that because we all need to be reminded of these things. And it's just a fun read. And it gets, like I said, we hear these things years in the past, and then we get back on our old bullshit and we do all these other habits and be like, no, it doesn't matter. This is how you can put boundaries up. This is how you can not care what others think because it's easier said than done in all cases.
Hmm.
Um, in the ADHD realm, the number one book I've been recommending is Atomic Habits.
Oh, yes. I love that book.
I've read a ton of other books that I feel like were the sources for that. And I didn't read that until about a year ago. And I'm like, where have you been my whole life? Because it wasn't a lot new for me, but it says in a couple hundred pages what it took 1,500 pages of other books to say. It's just so concise. There's no filler at all. Like every single page has 5 things you can use. So those are probably my number two right now for that. I've got tons I
Hmm.
can just run on my bookshelf, but let's keep it with that.
Yeah. No, Atomic Habits is a really good book. Definitely very concise and it's very applicable. So for people that are struggling with setting habits, he gives you really good guides on what are things that you can be doing in so many different scenarios too. So it's like everybody can get something out of it.
Yeah. So yeah, what's one last little piece of advice you want to give for people right now?
Oh man. I'm so not used to getting asked questions, so thank you. I would just say give yourself some grace. I think, especially our society, where it's such a go, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. We need to be doing the best. And, especially with, circumstances right now, it can be really difficult for a lot of people. And so I think a big one is like if you need a rest day, if you need a you day, take it. Your body and your mind will thank you. The Body Keeps Score is also another really good book about, stress and anxiety. And so just give yourself some grace. If you need to take some time off away from people, from friends, family, if you can, if you have a sick day you can use for work, like something, just take care of yourself because no one else is going to do that for you.
Yeah. I heard recently that we all need a certain amount of rest and we can either choose to take it or it will take us. And that's what burnout is that we're not acknowledging the amount of rest that we need for whatever we're doing in our lives, whether it's working really hard or just dealing with a really tough time. So yeah, you have to bake that in or it will find you when you just collapse one day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about you?
Oh, the advice? Let's say if you're struggling right now and you're trying to do something difficult, whether creative or something on your own or just normal life, it will get better. Don't give up. Seek the small little wins. Give yourself some grace. Like I like how you're talking about writing down the things that you actually did. I did that with a client earlier today. I'm like, let's just write what you did do. So like it will get better. Everything's going great. It will get worse. And that's just life. You have to be ready. And sometimes people, I think, they're trying something new. They have this excitement. I'm like, be ready for the slump. It's going to happen. And instead of feeling like this loss, like I was doing so well and what happened? Like, no, it's just life. So you have all your systems in place, you have your mindset techniques, you have whatever it is to keep you up there to minimize the negative impact of that slump so you can get back to that next I don't say next high, that peak better, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, like you can't get the peak if there's no valley.
Exactly.
Right. And so I think, especially in regards to, mental health, I feel like it's a lot more trendy now that people are pushing, like, oh, the best and the highs and all that. But you have to also acknowledge that you're going to have some lows because that's just life.
Exactly.
But just being prepared for when they come, and that way you can roll through them a little easier and be ready for when the next peak comes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Dan, thank you again for chatting. I really enjoyed our conversation and it was fun to be asked a few questions. So thank you for
Thank
that.
you, Zara. This is a lot
Yeah.
of fun.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, final cheers. Thank you. And guys, thank you for tuning to this episode. I'm going to link all of Dan's information in the show notes. That way you can find him. Is there anything you want to plug in?
I'll just say you can find me at ADHDcoachdan.com. I work with creatives and entrepreneurs, if definitely more a high performing ADHD coach. So if you've already got a pretty good basic executive function level, but you're trying to do something really difficult on your own and you've got a lot of time to do it, and for whatever reason it's not happening, then come talk to me. But even if you're struggling a little bit more, I know dozens of other ADHD coaches that all have their own specific specialty. So being able to put somebody that really needs help with the person that can help them the most also, you know, really gives me a lot of pleasure as well.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. Again, I'll put everything in the show notes so you can easily find him. And thank you for tuning this week. Rate, like, subscribe, share with friends and family if you haven't already. And we'll see you on the next week and next episode. All right, bye, guys. Love ya.